Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and despite only having done one review of the first Lost Exo Realm release from Fansproject, I've been keeping up with the line, so let's go straight up out of order and take a look at Volar and Velos, the first Lost Exo Realm figure to come out in his retail colors before a convention-exclusive variant, which I'm assuming to be blue and diaclone, wherever and whenever it does come out. Volar turns into one of them pterodactyl robot dinosaurs and definitely has got some ups and downs. His color scheme is uniformly matched up to the retail versions of Columpio and Kubrar, filling out his palette with heaping helpings of gunmetal, silver, rich gold, and deep red. I dug the last two Lost Exo Realm dinosaur head sculpts, and Volar's is right up there with their ensleekened throwbacky goodness. I think his wing shape and body are pretty badass, but I can't deny that he's got a blobby, baggy pants look on his legs. It's clear that the designer wanted to bulk up this character's often expected gangly avian legs, though the end result could have gone better. I will say that given the propensity for swoopalikes to turn into a thick-winged block with two stick-like bird feet stuck on the bottom, it's nice to see a change of pace, albeit a slightly flawed one. That wingspan, though! When I got him out of the box, Volar really struck me with the unexpected size and presence of his dino mode, especially after the first photos had me expecting something a little closer to Planet X's Kalis in terms of scale. He's got some weapon storage ports on either side of his first wing elbow, though I think the rocket launchers look their best when connected to his robot mode palms there on the dino backpack. And yeah, his sword is just kinda there when stored on his alt mode, just like the last two Fansproject dinos. The big new thing that Volar does among toy puteros is an attempt at allowing for the modern theory of how these flapping dinosaurs actually stood and walked around on land to be seen in the toy itself. At least according to my secret paleontology connections, he's the first. While this immediately enraged the G1-centric among our fandom, I am way into seeing the Dinobots get some modernized alt-mode imagery. Unfortunately, Volar doesn't quite pull it off right, mostly due to some unexpected limitations on his dino jointing. The main thing getting in the way of this working is that the shoulders can't actually fold in any tighter here, and the legs can't come together any tighter than this. So you're kind of stuck with him always a little bit dynamically splayed out. It's kind of like a Yamaguchi Revoltech style problem, except not on a Yamaguchi toy or a Revoltech toy. So I like what they're going for with this. I think it looks kind of cool that it's even happening, and having seen pictures, having talked to Mikey, I very much more so understand what this is trying to do. I just wish that the limitations were not getting in the way of more options. There are a lot of options if you don't need to do this particular pose. Let's take a look at the head first, though, because I know there was a lot of question as to whether or not this guy's head could even pose. So it can. The mouth can do that. So there's a hinge here. And then right above that hinge, right, that gold stuff there, there's a ball socket joint, which allows his head to tilt a little bit and twist a little bit sideways. So he can look around. He can't look all the way around due to just stuff getting in the way, but you can move stuff out of the way, but that means you're starting to de-transform his chest, and I don't think that looks very good. And he can look up and forward about that far, which I think is fine. I know that there are some folks who will want him to be able to have his head pointing straight out that way, so unfortunately that's not the case on Volar. As for his wings, the shoulders have got... Alright, let's count the joints here. So we've got kind of a large buttery ratchet that allows for this direction, clicky ratchet in that direction, and then outside of those two points of articulation, another clicky ratchet right here. Then we've got a friction joint there, and a friction joint there. And, like, these wings can go out pretty far, but you can also fold them out all the way like this. Then you start getting holes in here. Again, I don't know if that's something that could be seen as representative of something about the current modern ideal of a pteranodonadactyl, but that is something that does get a little bit in the way aesthetically of getting the wings out farther than about this. I don't really know what could have been done to alleviate that other than more panels coming out down here, and that might have started to mess with things when folding the wings up all the way like that, which I'll go into more in the robot mode. Also, I mean, that's really the important one right there. He's got, whoops, some waist articulation that's more accessible in his robot mode, but can you? I mean, you're going to bang the jetpack here a whole bunch, but you can get a little bit of waist twist. And there's also a 3-click clicky ab joint. This click actually is really helpful. in that it lets you hunch the body and head forward a little bit. You can click back up to here. There's one more click that way, but the jetpack just gets in the way of really making any use of that. Also, tail, baby. Yeah! His hips can go a little bit forwards, and then a little bit backwards, and it's really just the one click for this mode. Anything outside of that starts to look real funny. Same with this. There's like a click in each direction. Well, just one click of motion. Otherwise, his big baggy pants just start banging into everything, and these things often end up looking really weird if you don't have his legs pretty much in a position where they are touching on and thus looking like a connective tissue for his pectorals. This, I think, looks fine at a glance, because to me it flows. But once you start moving outside of that, it all starts to come apart a little bit, much like, you know, these gaps here in the wings. So there's posability on a lot of this dude. It's just got very odd little limitations. What better way to show that than also down here, where there's a knee joint, but there's this thing sticking out, and that thing sticking out looks best when lined up with the sculpt, because it flows very naturally, but nothing locks it in place. And this is a very useful joint. You just have to kind of get over that part, which fills in a gap there. This becomes the heel for the robot mode foot, so it is an integral piece of engineering. You'll see in the transformation how this is not a part of that. There is, however, a really solid ball-jointed ankle on the dino foot. And my favorite part about this is, for all the weirdness of posing this guy and all the strange concessions one has to make when putting him into any position, if you decide to get him, like, you know, perched and flat-footed, there is a surprising amount of range on these ball socket ankles, and he will very often always be, like, flat-footed, and very solidly so. So there are some victories in this mode as far as jointing. There are some brave ideas, and some of those ideas just didn't pan out, and really the main thing that gets in the way of a lot of potential here are just small limitations on a lot of these joints in this mode. As for his little riding guy, who we'll talk about in a little bit, there are a couple of tabs up here, and this is the first time, I think, where... Yeah, this is the first time that there are solid tabs that go into the slots on the bottom of his feet here that let this little dude just sit up here and stay up there. Well, if I shake him, he'll fall off. Unfortunately, the tab connection is kind of one way. Like, it slips on like that, but nothing locks it other than friction. So, if you're flying him around, it's all cool. But if you start, like, violently shaking him, then he will get flung off. Kind of like how, earlier on, this guy stays standing pretty well, even on a slippery surface like my mechanical chain bases. But no matter what position you get him into, you know, he'll stay pretty solid if I do a whole bunch of, you know, little battings like this. But if I just straight up smack him in the face, yeah, he'll fall over. Can he take falling over? I don't know. I think so. Anyway, let's get on, and let's get robotic. After the tricky legs of Columpio and the exponentially finickier legs and torso of Kubrar, Volar brings a much simpler and smoother transformation to the Lost Exo Realm table. The legs use multiple hinges, rather than a simple slide-out mechanism, with the bot mode and dino mode feet switching places to fill in the rear side of the shins. As for the robot arms, they were slightly obviously chilling out as a jetpack on Volar's Putera mode, and add about 3 more rotations than I expected to switch places with the dino shoulders and move the wings into a proper Icarus-style position. And the chest does not hold back, doing a quick bisection slide to bulk up a bit before pegging into the sides of the folded-down dino mask. It's a little tight, those pegs. Oh, and don't forget to fold up the tail, because I constantly do. Volar's got an athletically svelte robot mode, slimmer than Kubrar and Columpio, but not skin and bone skinny by any means. Actually, the natural sloping of his shoulders through his pectorals and down to his abs, then out at his hips and down his legs, I think it all looks rather mecha-sexy. His color palette is mostly unchanged, which means the retail Volar is going toy swoopish with a red chest. The head sculpt is very Columpio, between the 80s toy lips and the heavy black lining around his metallic blue optics. He does have a properly silly swoop-style swept-back cone hat, keeping him a part of that strange little club. There are several different ways to orient Volar's wings in robot mode, and just about all of them speak to me in some way, though my 2 favorites are the fully folded backpack diamond and the relaxed scythe style, patent pending. These wings also do that action figure with wings thing where they add a sense of bigness and grandiose mass that's hard to communicate outside of seeing it in person. Volar's 2 rocket launchers are very throwback and feature removable red warheads. There aren't any springs, just handheld flight. By which I mean throwing. Their wing joint mounting holes are still usable in robot mode, and a lot of the art and photography has them plugged on, front side and pointing up. You can also stick them sideways into a backpack style setup, though this totally gets in the way of Volar's neck swiveling. Finally, the fold-out handles can key slot into his palms for handheld rocket launching acrobatics. For melee choppery, Volar's got his own version of the Lost Exo Realm ruby-bladed broadsword, once again featuring a slightly tweaked handle, once again looking like delicious tongue-slicing cherry candy. Straight up, Volar's robot mode is not as limited as his dino mode, but there is one particular joint that is a little limited, that's his neck joint. So it's a ball socket connection, which allows for some wiggle, some up and down stuff, a lot of up and down stuff actually, and some left and right stuff. But if you notice, his head is often tilted up very slightly most of the time. There is a way you can adjust this because there's like that hinge joint and ball socket joint going on. You can mess a little bit with the way that the orientation of the dino head is. That messes with how it's pegged into the chest parts. The tricky thing there is that starts to either depeg the chest parts or you end up with this kind of uneven look back here, which is easily adjustable, and it's in the back, so even if that kind of thing bugs you, you won't see it much. But it's mostly due to the the really tight yet strangely ununiform way that the pegs on the insides of these red parts peg into the sides of the dino head. His shoulders are on a pile of joints, so there's a ball socket connection here, and it's like, oh no, it's Function X code. Nope, there's also a hinge right there. And then that whole thing is connected to a ratcheted, or at least detented, transformation swivel that also really functions well as a shoulder joint. So you've got this range, and that range, more or less all unhindered. I mean, this is about as far as it can go, so it can't go all the way like crazy up, but I think that's really cool how the shoulders turned out. There is a simple bicep swivel. You might have seen it during the transformation. There is an elbow joint. I think it is technically a double-jointed elbow, but I certainly don't get any kind of double-jointed range out of it, despite there being 2 points of movement. This is also in question. There is a wrist swivel. Don't you worry. This guy can waggle his wrists quite happily, and he's got a knuckle joint. It's very similar to Kubrar and Columpio's, although unlike those two, I find that his open hand sculpt looks a bit weirder than the other two. The other two somehow just look more natural. Maybe it's because he's got these like kind of claw finger things going on, but his arms and shoulders are pretty much fully posable. He's got a waist swivel from the dinosaur mode, and then that ab thing that we saw in the dinosaur mode, it's beautiful here. So there's the middle click, the forward click, and the backward click. That's super solid, and I really like that joint. It does a ton for the robot mode. His wings, also, in case you're curious, still retain their full multi-axis posability and all of their different arrangements and stuff that I think I was just talking about. But, yeah, no hindrances on the wings, no hindrances on the shoulders or the torso, only the head so far. His hips even have more range here than they did in dinosaur mode, because now you get the full use of the detented universal joint. It's pretty buttery in this direction. Van Damme tier is a pretty, mid-tier. It's like, you know, B- grade Van Damme. He can only go out about that far. And then his weapon holster thingies just bang into the sides of his hips. His knees are fully double-jointed, and quite delightfully so, actually. I do find, however, there is a thing you might be wondering if I left it out. The other two Lost Exo Realm guys have this theme where they have a kneecap piece that folds forward, and on this guy, they do fold forward, but I find this just immensely weakens the aesthetic. This does nothing, by the way, for the Pteranodonadactyl mode, and all this does here is allow his legs to bend, I think, like a little bit too far forward at the knee. Because, I mean, surely there's something to be said for cleaning up his knee a little bit, getting rid of the appearance of that double-jointed hinge and bringing it forward a touch. You can just bring it forward way too much like this, and if you leave these closed and then push this right up against the barrier of the knee pad, I just find it makes for the nicest looking natural slope, and I don't feel like gain anything by folding these out, so I just leave them in on both modes. His ankles can tilt, yo! Well, that's his robot foot tilting. It's actually just a mushroom peg. thing going on here. There is a ball joint down here, and you can use it a little bit to get a deeper tilt. It's very slightly deeper tilt, or even a bit of sideways swivel. Thing is, if you start messing with that ankle ball joint, you're now also messing with this thing here that's filling in the back of his leg. And while this part is on its own ball joint to adjust slightly for what you're doing, I just find it's much simpler to just use the front piece for an ankle tilt. The heel piece is a great heel strut, but it doesn't have much of a large flat surface. It really is built to be on an edge, so there's nothing lost by having him go wide-legged and then just sealing the front of his robot feet to the angle of the ground. I think it works fine. Poseability-wise, Volar's robot mode is a delight. I think it is the least hindered, poseability-wise, of all the Lost Exo Realm toys so far, and going with his aesthetic, it's just a truly dynamic-looking robot mode. Velos is Volar's partner Solaron, and damn it, guys, they fixed so much that went wrong with Drepan and Tekor. I mean, straight up, check out the lack of a giant stick jutting outward from the back of this little guy's neck. He does have a shaft, but it's folded up flush against his back, Target Master style. Velos also has paint on his face, and a far more personalized color scheme. He even links aesthetics with Volar by having his own little pair of wing sticks on his backpack. Velos carries a spear, and the peg tolerances are way less scary than Tekor and his twin axes. However, the fist hole still has a floor, which means full weapon insertion could create a vacuum seal. But even if you stick it in all the way, I found his spear slips back out without much of a fight. It's like it's naturally better lubricated or something. Velos has got nearly the same poseability as his two tiny predecessors, with ball joints, and hinges, and ball joint hinges, and double hinges, though he does lose the ability to swivel at the neck. He can look up a bit if you use the transformation joint. As for that transformation, it's pretty close to the other two, with a lot of the same tricks, though this time the legs splay outwards and connect to the wing sticks to form the basic shape of his crossbow mode. And this thing's pretty damn effective. It looks good in Volar's grasp, and Velos' spear loads into the barrel for fake imaginary firing action. However, it's loaded all the way in there in the box, and there's a floor at the bottom of that shaft, which means that when I first opened the toy, a hardcore vacuum seal had formed and the arrow would not budge. I was able to free it up by soaking the area in a cup of boiling water for a few minutes, and then pulling only outwards without twisting or rocking the arrow until it came out with a pop of air release. Basically, be careful, man. The plastic's not weak, but if a vacuum seal forms, that seal ain't weak either. Overall, I feel that Volar and Velos are improved entries in the Lost Exo Realm lineup. Volar's Dino mode is arguably weaker than his predecessors, despite going for something laudably unique among swoops and swoop-alikes in general. But just about every other aspect of the set feels like it has taken into account a lot of the feedback people have shared on the last two Fansproject Dino robots. Many points of articulation are clicky ratchet joints of pleasant tolerances, solving many of the looseness issues found in copies of Columpio. The transformation is a satisfying breeze in both directions, avoiding the persnickety task that was getting Kubrar back into his Dino mode. And Velos feels like the first transforming Solaron to, like, get it! Aesthetically, this is still very true to the vision laid out by Kubrar and Columpio. It's a particular anime aesthetic that Volar continues to lean into. If the baseline designs of Lost Exo Realm aren't your thing, he won't try to change your mind. But if the physical experience of Kubrar or Columpio had put you off the line, it's worth at least getting some hands-on time with Volar and Velos. I've often felt like Lost Exo Realm is the pet project of a newer design lead within Fansproject, and this release feels like a major step forward for that hypothetical design lead's growth. I hope to see even more improvement on the next entry in the line. I also hope that the shared victory of Kubrar and Columpio's Dino modes are not forgotten despite its absence on Volar, that being a solid and definitive default stance for the Dino mode. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and I totally have it written on my mental whiteboard to go back and do some reviews for the other Lost Exo Realm figures. What? The physical whiteboard? Why would I get one of those? That's crazy grade school talk.